With Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini locked into the San Jose Sharks for next season, who would you rather have looking at other young forward combos around the NHL?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Western Conference Tuesdays on Locked On NHL Network. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. If you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow along wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch this on YouTube as well. And today we're going to look around the NHL to try to find which young forward combos you would rather take over Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith. So we're going to start out with some kind of rules and kind of the thought exercise. Look at, every team and see who has players that qualify, which teams maybe just don't have enough guys to kind of make the cut, and then kind of other teams where you can make the case for it. So before we get to all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs are now finished. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right. Idea I've been kind of cooking up for a little bit here. And, with Macklin Celebrini, who's going to be 18 when the season starts, or who's 18 right now, and Will Smith, who's 19. The Sharks have one of the best young forward groups, or at least duos, combos, whatever, however you want to kind of pairings, however you want to put it, in the NHL. And I thought, well, who's got it better than us right now? And looking around the NHL, like I kind of wanted to stack them up and put them in tiers and kind of see who you would want. And there's players, a lot of the players we're talking about are going to be better players this season than Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith. And that's to be expected as two teenagers make their first ride into the NHL. But, it helps you kind of see, I think, how special the Sharks duo of Celebrini and Smith could be. So some rules I kind of tried to go by was, only looked at forwards again, right? I didn't do like a forward defense pairing. It was forwards only. Guys who I expect to play in the NHL this season, right? So if you just drafted like Montreal, right? Just drafted Ivan Demidov. Demidov's not going to be playing in the NHL this year, right? He's going back to Russia. Or like Columbus, Tisha Gill or Caden Lindstrom, right? Caden Lindstrom's probably not going to be playing in the NHL. So I was looking at guys who I expect to play in the NHL this year. And I had to pick a cutoff age, right? And I picked 23 and under. So if you're 24 and over, like you've probably already established yourself. You're not, you're going, we kind of know what you're going to be or expected to be. So those are just some rules. They're very arbitrary. When I first was doing it, it was like ELCs only, but then it was a lot of teams were getting not qualified, et cetera, et cetera. So it kind of went to age 23, right? And I figure that kind of gives you a nice grouping of the young guns, at least when it comes to the forward. So let's start by looking at teams that just didn't qualify because, they're just don't have enough young players. So you have the Canucks, the Bruins, the Kings, which I was a little surprised. You have Byfield, but then it's a lot of older guys who are kind of on the forward department. The Lightning, of course. The Blues, which again, they're kind of in a little bit of they have a lot of younger forwards, but guys who are just kind of over the cutoff. The Jets, the Avalanche, the Penguins, the Islanders, who don't let anybody under the age of 30 play with them. The Panthers and the Oilers. So these guys, they didn't really have enough guys to kind of qualify for this exercise. And if you notice, a lot of these teams are teams that you either competing for Stanley Cups or usually kind of very good teams, right? I think everybody in this group, with the exception of the Blues and Penguins, made the playoffs last year. And thank you for the Penguins for that 14th overall pick. So, and the Blues, if they had beaten the Sharks once, twice, a couple times, they make the playoffs. But those are the teams that just don't qualify. So let's get to kind of my next tier of guys. And these they qualify, but come on. So you have the Preds with Luke Evangelista and Joachim Kimmel. Like, they're nice young players, but like we're not anywhere in the same ballpark here, right? Maple Leafs, Matthew Nyes, Nick Robertson. The Nick Robertson experience might even be over with Toronto, and right there, their core four is a whole different thing. So, the Golden Knights, you have Brendan Brisson and Alexander Holtz, who the Knights just got Holtz from the New Jersey Devils. But Brendan Brisson has been kind of a guy who hasn't really been able to establish himself as an NHL type player. And then you have the Caps with Portis and McMichael. Again, all these guys nobody's really kind of in the same ballpark as what we expect Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith to be with those groups there. So, it's very much seen, that's basically half the league here, right? Between the guys who don't qualify. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So almost half the league here is kind of already just wiped out because, one, they don't have enough young guys to qualify. And two, if they do have young guys, like, these guys are kind of not really in the same sphere. But if you look at a lot of these teams, right, a lot of these teams are teams who are kind of playoff caliber teams. You look at a team like the Preds, who are kind of pushing all their chips in right now to try to win. They're very aggressive in free agency. The Maple Leafs, who drafted really well, but have never been able to kind of get over the hump. The Golden Knights, who trade away all their young players, right? This pick that they picked in the 2024 draft with Trevor Connolly, this is their only first round pick in a 4-year span, right? If you go back to David Edstrom, who they drafted last year, they traded for Tomas Hertl, and then they traded away their next 2 picks, one to the San Jose Sharks, and then the next one to the Calgary Flames. So they are a team who's going to not have, basically any of these young players kind of coming up through their pipeline, but that's just how they operate, right? They are a win now type of team. They're going to continue to be aggressive with trades, trying to acquire top tier talent, and then hopefully figure things out as they go along and shed guys as they kind of become not useful, right? And then the Caps, who are in a weird state of they're just a weird team, right? Because they're going to do whatever they can right now to get Alexander Ovechkin his scoring title. And then I think after that happens, and once he retires, then they're going to probably blow things up and probably rebuild for real. But right now, they're if they get to the playoffs, they get to the playoffs. But right now, the whole thing is just try to be competitive enough for Alexander Ovechkin to kind of be at least a threat every night to score. So really interesting kind of going through this, and it was a good opportunity for me as I went through this whole process to kind of see where teams are kind of at and which teams are kind of rebuilding, where they're at kind of at in their life cycle. So we'll get to kind of some of the teams that I have a okay maybe kind of group, and then you've got one group. So we'll look at some of those teams, and then we'll look at the teams who can make a legitimate case, and we'll kind of go through those here in a little bit more in depth. So, but before we get to that, let's go ahead and take a quick break. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up customers all summer long. You can get a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to fanduel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, so we kind of looked at the teams who, right, there's not really a chance. These teams are kind of like they're in a different part of their life cycle, which is fine. So this next group was a really weird group, and there's only 2 teams on it, but they're really weird teams, to be honest. And we'll look at the okay maybe group, and that's the Wild, who've got Matt Boldy and Marco Rossi. And then the Sabres, who have Zach Benson and JJ Peterka. So both these teams are kind of in that like creamy middle. We might make the playoffs. We might not make the playoffs. Boldy and Rossi are both like good players, but you're easily taking Celebrini and Smith over both of them, right? If you just stack up all 4 of them, right, you're taking Celebrini, Smith before you get to Boldy and Rossi. And right now, I know Boldy, like these players are both better players than the Celebrini and Smith are right now, but like you're banking on the untapped potential with Celebrini and Smith and what you're expecting them to be over Boldy and Rossi. And again, I love both those players. I think they're both great players. I love to have them on my team. But like nobody, like if the Wild called up and said, we'll offer you Boldy and Rossi for Celebrini and Smith, my career is going to hang up the phone and just laugh for the next like 20 minutes. So the Sabres, you have, again, kind of that eternal rebuild team. Are they ever going to make the playoffs type of scenario with Zach Benson and JJ Peterka as their 2 guys? I love both these players, right? Zach Benson, I know, a little bit smaller, but like made an impact last year in the NHL. And JJ Peterka, who I thought the Sharks should have drafted in 2020 instead of Ozzy Weisblatt, has had a really solid start to his NHL career. And again, kind of the same thing, right? Both these guys are better players, I think, than Celebrini and Smith right now, just because they have NHL experience. But again, if the Sabres called up and offered both them for Celebrini and Smith, my career again, he's going to put down the phone and laugh for the next 20 minutes. So yeah, those guys are good players. And again, with the Wild and the Sabres are just kind of weird teams that you're just trying to kind of figure things out with what they're trying to do and what their future is. And you look at like they have stars, like Kirill Kaprizov, legitimate NHL superstar, right? And you look at like the defense from the Sabres, right? They have a bunch of great pieces there, but again, just looking at the forwards who are under 23 and who expected to play in the NHL, I'm gonna take the Sharks guys here right now. So the next group of players is like you've got one guy, but maybe kind of missing out on the other guy. So Hurricanes have Seth Jarvis and Bradley Nadeau. And Nadeau's had a really, really nice seat for, kind of freshman season in college. A bit of a surprise for him to come out, but Seth Jarvis is like amazing. Seth Jarvis is going to be, like a potential 40 goal scorer every year and has really established himself kind of from the get-go as a legitimate scoring threat and part of this Hurricanes next core, or kind of as they're continuing to figure things out and they're in their kind of, I guess, championship window. Who knows with this team? They're kind of going through some changes right now, but Seth Jarvis is he's going to get paid a big contract for a lot of money for the next, 7 to 8 years, and expect him to live up to that contract because he's really, really good. Bradley Nadeau, he's going to be a potential AHL, NHL guy. I kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt just for this exercise that he gets in, especially with kind of all the changes and the way the Hurricanes draft and develop. I'm sure he's going to be a really good player, but even if you just kind of compare, right? Celebrini and Smith to Jarvis, and they do like it's pretty easy there. The Rangers, Alexei Lafreniere and Capo Caco, which both these guys were very high end, first or second pit round or first or second overall picks in their drafts. And Lafreniere has figured things out, and Capo Caco just doesn't seem to be able to kind of, yeah, right. Like you're kind of waiting. Like you thought he had his breakout season a season ago, and then he kind of took a step back this year, and now he's potentially trade bait as it kind of dangled out there. And like you can kind of make the case, okay, like even if Lafreniere was like as a first overall pick, would you rather have him or Macklin Celebrini? And I think with Celebrini's all around game, I'm taking Celebrini. And would you rather have Capo Caco or Will Smith? I'm taking Will Smith right now, just because again, like we've seen Capo Caco have a really good season, kind of maybe start to have that breakout process, but it just hasn't kind of come together for him. So with the Sens, you have Tim Stützle, who's like on his way to be a legitimate NHL superstar, and then Shane Pinto, who's put together some nice seasons, but it's also got into some trouble here. And like again, you could take like say Stützle and like between the two, like okay, Stützle and versus Celebrini. I mean, I would personally take Celebrini, but like you can at least make an argument between the two, and as a third overall pick from the Sens. But Pinto versus Will Smith, like I'm taking Will Smith every day, all day. So, and then the Flyers here, kind of the same thing, right? Matvei Michkov, who's in the same boat as what we kind of expect from him. We expect him to be really, really good. But Tyson Forrester, right? Solid kind of start. And I think the Sharks upside here is just way, way too good. So even if Michkov, who was the 7th overall pick in last year's draft, Will Smith was, I know a lot of Sharks fans wanted Michkov over Will Smith. And that'll be a tightly debated thing between here and eternity. And especially if Michkov turns into a superstar and Will Smith has, just doesn't turn into a superstar. There'll be a lot of Sharks fans who said they should have picked Michkov. But again, that's who knows with Michkov and behind the scenes stuff. And if he just said, I don't want to go to San Jose, et cetera, et cetera. But we can let that, we've had that argument 1,000 times, but just comparing the two, right? Even if Michkov and if you compare Michkov Will Smith and you give the edge to Michkov there, you're taking Celebrini over Tyson Forrester every day of the week. Like it's not close. So, and nothing against Forrester. He's had a great start to his NHL career, but like the Sharks just, again, and this will be interesting too, because with Michkov kind of hitting the ground at the same time as Will Smith, both in the same draft class, to kind of compare those rookie seasons to see how they go. I think the Flyers are going to be a better team, as they definitely exceeded expectations last year. But I think though, like still, you're taking Celebrini and Smith, and like it's not particularly close. Like you could give me the Michkov over Will Smith, but I'm taking Celebrini over whatever else you can come up with the Flyers. So we'll get into kind of teams and who can actually make a legitimate case here. And so these will be really fun. We'll kind of go through some of these guys and kind of make a case of who you would rather have. And yes, a lot of these guys have played NHL games right now. They're probably better NHL players, but looking long term as well, we'll kind of make the argument for each one. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. All right, let's finish up with the you can make a case. So there's actually several teams here who so it's exciting to see a lot of young teams with a lot of young potential on their rosters. So let's start with Utah, who has Logan Cooley and Dylan Guenther. Both these guys top end picks. Cooley and Guenther, but Cooley kind of was a bit of kind of a back and forth with him coming out. Gunther, who kind of originally kind of like Eklund, made the team right out of his draft year, but then ended up going back and playing in the W for a little bit. But both these guys are young, exciting, dynamic players. And I think there's been a little bit, even the Cooley versus, your like Slakowski debate that happened from a couple years ago. Like Cooley's still really these are both really good players. I would give, though, you do have the nice like Dylan Gunther as a wing, while both the Smith and Celebrini project to be centers. So you might give a slight edge this year, but like in 2 years, it's probably going to be Celebrini and Smith, just because again, if they both pan out to what we expect them to be. The Blackhawks, of course, Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar. So this one's really interesting because Bedard, who was the number 1 pick last year, generational talent, right? So you're going to give him the slight edge compared to Celebrini, right? And Celebrini is thought to be a franchise player, maybe not a generational talent like Connor Bedard. But Will Smith versus Frank Nazar, like, I think that's pretty easy. Will Smith between the two. And I do like Frank Nazar a lot. So, like, you kind of want now if the Sharks and now if the Blackhawks had gotten Demidov and Demidov was coming over and you had Bedard versus Demidov versus Celebrini versus Smith, that would have been a very interesting one. So I still like Nazar probably still is like a really high end 3C or a good 2C. I still think Smith has like a really high end 2C potential, especially if Celebrini is the 1C that we expect them to be. So the Anaheim Ducks. This was actually, I had to kind of make a choice here between theirs. So I went with Leo Carlsson and Cutter Gauthier because I thought the comparison was more interesting. So you have Leo Carlsson, who was the 2nd overall pick in last year's draft, the same draft as Will Smith, and who played last year, dealt with some injuries, so we didn't really kind of get the full taste of it. But like a lot of people would have an interesting conversation between Carlson and Celebrini if they were in the same draft class. And I would still go. I would still personally go Celebrini. Of course, I'm going to be 100% biased here as I'm a Sharks fan. But I really liked Leo Carlsson of last year, right? He was one of the guys, like if the Sharks had gotten Leo Carlsson, I would have been super happy with him, getting him at number 4. Then you have Cutter Gauthier, who is played with Will Smith, put up a bajillion points. I know Cutter Gauthier had a better, scoring. Like he scored more goals. He's also playing kind of first line minutes. Maybe not the same talent around him as Will Smith, former 5th overall pick. Like it's really close between those two guys. And I think that's why the Sharks that's why I've been saying like the Sharks need to kind of build to compete with the Ducks, because the way the Ducks are putting this thing together, especially down the middle, and this is even including Mason McTavish, who you could also include into this argument. Like this is why the Sharks, they've spent a lot of time getting quality pieces kind of in their program here. So it's pretty close. You could I slightly lean Sharks just because I think Celebrini is going to be a touch better than Carlson, especially at his 200-foot game, like his all-around game. But you could say like Cutter Gauthier versus Will Smith if that's a draw. That's what you're hoping for. So, that's again, and that's in your own division. That's in your backyard right there with the Ducks. So. Red Wings, you have Marco Kasper and Lucas Raymond. Raymond, who's going to get himself a fat contract this year, is already on his way to being a great player. Marco Kasper, I think he's going to be a really, really good player, but I don't know if he's got like that next level potential that I think that you could see with Celebrini and Smith. So I'm going San Jose between those. So Blue Jackets, Fantilli and Kent Johnson. So Fantilli versus Celebrini, that's huge. That's right. That's been a big thing, is who gets kind of the nod between those two. That's going to be a very interesting, because they're kind of very, very similar players. So we'll just say, for the sake of the argument, we'll say it's a wash. Kent Johnson and Will Smith, kind of similar players. I think Kent Johnson's a little bit more like, I don't want to say dynamic, but a little bit more, kind of has a little bit more pizzazz, I think. But I think Will Smith's game, but he's also struggled to, kind of stay in an NHL lineup. And yes, I know the Blue Jackets have been a bit of a mess. Not that the Sharks are in a much better spot as of right now, but I do think that like, you could make a really solid argument here. But I do think the Will Smith versus Kent Johnson, I think, is Will Smith's kind of a little bit of the difference there between the two. So, well, if Fantilli and Celebrini kind of cancel each other out, I think the Smith versus Johnson, slight edge to Smith here. So I'm going to take that. And you have the Kraken with Matty Beniers and Shane Wright. Now, Matty Beniers, and you could say Matty Beniers, and so like Matty Beniers has had a really great start to his career. Won the Calder his rookie season. I think a little bit of a step back as the team took a step back last year. But has played his way into being a full 200 foot first line center for the Kraken, and kind of much like what you expect Celebrini to be. I think Matty Beniers is kind of done that. I still think Celebrini has a higher ceiling than Beniers, but Matty Beniers has become everything you'd want from him and more, right? Shane Wright is an interesting player because of, right, expected to be the first overall pick, slid down to fourth. He's had a bit of a weird development path, right, with playing in the OHL and then playing in the AHL and playing like he's played on 4 teams in one season. Was able to play in the AHL, was awesome in the AHL last year, and I think is going to make that full jump to the NHL next year. And again, this is right in your backyard with the Kraken and what they're building. And both these guys project to be centers. Like Beniers, if Beniers is your 1C and Shane Wright's your 2C, like that's that's a really nice comparison to what the Sharks have with Celebrini and Will Smith. So yeah, I'm gonna kind of go with a draw right there between those ones. So yeah, it's kind of a draw. So then the Canadians, you have Yurov Slavkovsky and Cole Caulfield. Caulfield kind of barely makes the cut. Slavkovsky, who was the first overall pick in his draft year, but if Slavkovsky and Celebrini were in the same draft, Celebrini goes first. Cole Caulfield, though, like the Caulfield versus Smith like comparison is going to be interesting. I think Caulfield's a much, much better scorer, but I think Will Smith's probably going to be a little bit better player. So again, I'm leaning Sharks there just because I think Slavkovsky the gap between Slavkovsky and the gap between Celebrini, I think is that you're going Celebrini. So stars, you have Wyatt Johnson and Logan Stankoven. So this one is interesting because both these guys were kind of late first round picks, but like Wyatt Johnson blew up last year, right? And turning, and you saw in the playoffs just kind of turning into like an absolute superstar for the Stars. But like both these, and Logan Stankoven like had a really nice AHL season, played really well in his kind of NHL season. Quiet in the playoffs, which is kind of to be expected with a 21-year-old making his first like kind of NHL. He kind of hit that wall, I think, of playing NHL games and kind of playing that many games. But I would be. You're still betting on like the draft pedigree and stuff like that. And Wyatt Johnson, Logan Stankoven have had, really great developments. And, if you redid those drafts, those guys are going way, way higher. But I'm still picking the Sharks guys. So one team I did forget to kind of put on the list, that'd be the New Jersey Devils. And they have Dawson Mercer and Jack Hughes. And Jack Hughes is like awesome. And Will Smith is very much like that is kind of what you expect. We are hoping him to turn into is a Jack Hughes like player. And then Dawson Mercer has been awesome as well. With Celebrini and, like that, I think you go slight lean towards the Devils just because of Jack Hughes is, Jack Hughes is the like Will Smith ceiling. That's like what you're hoping him to be in. While I think Celebrini is going to be a better player than Dawson Mercer. Again, there's just so much you're hoping on for Will Smith to kind of be Jack Hughes. Jack Hughes is already Jack Hughes. So, yeah, that one's a tough one there. And that team is drafted and developed a lot of young players and stuff. But I think though this gives you a good look at like I think how special the Sharks' young players are between Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini, what you're projecting them to be in. Yes, most of these players are going to be better players than Celebrini and Smith their first year, but in the next couple seasons, you can see where you expect these guys to kind of rank among the NHL's young guns, and with them being 18 and 19, by the time they get that age 23, that's 4 or 5 years 4 years basically for these guys. They're going to be on their second contracts by then. Like they're easily, I think, going to be in the upper echelon of anybody in the NHL, let alone young guns, but just anybody in the NHL. I think you're going to be Celebrini and Smith compared versus everybody else. Like you're going to take those two, I think, on most nights. So that's going to be it for me today. We'll be back tomorrow. Of course, we're going to do look at some goalies at some time this week, try to find a third goalie for the Sharks, a guy who can kind of play AHL minutes if you need to play some NHL games here. So look at some potential options there. We're going to do some winners and losers of free agency here as well. Then we're going to start diving into some of these Sharks new draft prospects and kind of get to know their games a little bit more. So make sure you follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter at MyFryHole. Till tomorrow. Bye, friends.